Please, my son is in that water. Please help me. Help me!
Madam, I cannot swim. Someone else will go.
Somebody, anybody, please. He's only 8 months old. This current is too strong. Nobody can survive that. You are recording. You are recording while my son is dying.
Helen did not scream when the water took her son. She had been screaming for the past 30 seconds and nobody had moved. So she stopped screaming and she jumped. The floodwater in that narrow Enugu street had risen in less than 4 minutes. One moment, the gutters were full and running fast. The next, the entire road was a river, brown and thick, and moving with terrifying speed, pulling everything with it. A wooden stool, a blue plastic bucket, a woman's head tie spinning in the current like a lost thing looking for somewhere to land. Helen had been crossing that road with her son Emmanuel, strapped to her chest in a faded orange wrapper. Emmanuel was 8 months old. He had his father's nose and his grandmother's laugh, and he had just learned 3 days ago to clap his hands. Helen had been watching him clap all morning. She had been so distracted by his small happy hands that she did not see how fast the water was rising beneath her feet. When the current hit her from the side, it hit hard. She staggered. Her hands went out to catch herself. And in that single unguarded second, the wrapper holding Emmanuel came loose and the water took him. She did not understand what had happened at first. Her hands grabbed at nothing. She looked down and saw orange fabric trailing away in the current. Then she heard him. One short cry, sharp and startled, the kind of cry a baby makes when something frightens him. And then the sound was gone, swallowed by the rushing water and the noise of the rain.
Helen opened her mouth, and what came out was not a word. It was something older than words. It was the sound a mother makes when the world has taken the most important thing she has ever held. There were at least 30 people on the raised concrete banks on both sides of that street. 30 people who had eyes and hands and legs. 30 people who heard Helen scream. Not one of them entered the water. A man in a grey suit, a big man, well-fed, with the kind of shoes that cost more than most people's monthly salary, shouted from the bank. He cupped his hands around his mouth and directed Helen where to go. Left, no, right, try to grab that pole. He gave instructions with great confidence and great comfort from a place where the water could not touch him. A woman in a yellow blouse had her phone raised from the moment Emmanuel disappeared. She was recording everything. Her hands were steady. Her feet were planted. She did not move from her spot even once. 2 young men stood near the edge of the bank looking at each other. One of them took a half step forward. The other grabbed his shirt. "Too dangerous," he said. "You will die in there." The first young man looked at the water. He looked at Helen. He stepped back. A market woman clutched her wrapper to her chest and said she was praying. An old man shook his head slowly and said this was why people should not walk during heavy rain. A teenage boy watched with his mouth open and said nothing at all. Helen was alone in the water. She fought the current with everything inside her. The water was at her waist, then her chest, then her waist again as she found footing on something solid beneath the surface. She could not see Emmanuel. She could only move in the direction she had last heard his cry and trust that a mother's body knows things that the mind cannot calculate. The current was pulling everything toward the far end of the street where a large open drainage channel sat waiting. The drainage channel was deep, wide, concrete walls on all sides. Helen knew that if Emmanuel reached that drain, the water would take him down. She pushed harder. Her feet slipped. She went under for a moment, cold and dark and roaring in her ears, and she came back up gasping, still moving forward.
She did not see the boy until she was almost beside him. He was small, could not have been more than 13 or 14 years old. Thin, the way hunger makes a person thin. Arms like sticks, ribs visible beneath a torn shirt that had not been washed in too long. He was the boy the whole street knew. The one they chased away from their stalls, the one they threw water on when he slept in front of their shops, the one they called mad, useless, a problem that nobody wanted to solve. He had come from the other side of the drainage channel. He had jumped in from that end. Nobody on the bank had even noticed him go in. And he had positioned himself at the mouth of the drain, using his own thin body as a barrier, pressing himself against the concrete wall with his arms spread wide, stopping everything the current sent toward him.
He was bleeding from where the concrete had caught his shoulder. He was shaking from the cold and the force of the water, and pressed against his chest, crying weakly but breathing, was Emmanuel. Helen reached them in 4 more strokes. She grabbed her son with both hands. She held him against her body, and she pressed her face into his wet neck. And the sound she made then was different from the sound she had made when he was taken. This sound was not a wound. This sound was something being healed. The boy helped push them toward the bank. His thin arms found strength from somewhere that thin arms are not supposed to have. He pushed and guided until Helen got footing and climbed out. The crowd on the bank erupted. They cheered, they clapped. The man in the suit said, loudly so everyone could hear, that he had been directing Helen the whole time, that his instructions had helped. The woman in the yellow blouse lowered her phone and smiled, as though she had been part of something good. Helen stood on the bank with Emmanuel against her chest. She looked at the crowd. She looked at the man in the suit. She looked at the woman with the phone. She looked at the 2 young men who had stepped back from the edge. She did not say a single word to any of them. She turned around, walked back to the water's edge, reached down and helped the boy climb out. He stood beside her, dripping and shivering, blood running slowly down his arm, looking at the ground the way someone looks when they expect to be chased away again. Helen put her free hand on his shoulder. She said, "What is your name?" He said quietly, "Chukwuemeka." She said, "Chukwuemeka, you saved my son today. That means you are coming home with me." He looked up at her. He had not been looked at directly in a very long time. He blinked. He did not know what to do with kindness that arrived without conditions. He went with her. That was the beginning. Helen had a 2-room apartment on the quiet side of Enugu. She had very little. A government salary that stretched thin every month, a small gas cooker, a mattress on the floor of the 2nd room that she had been meaning to replace for 2 years. She gave Chukwuemeka the mattress. She fed him that evening. She cleaned the cut on his shoulder with careful hands. She enrolled him in school the following Monday. People talked the way people always talk. Her neighbors said she was foolish, a woman alone taking in a street boy she did not know. Her sister came and told her the boy would rob her. Her colleague at the office said it was dangerous, irresponsible, the kind of thing that ends badly. Helen listened to all of them. She thanked them for their concern. She went home and helped Chukwuemeka with his homework. The boy was sharp, sharper than anyone who had written him off had bothered to discover. He read everything. He asked questions that surprised his teachers. Within 1 term, he had moved from the back of the class to somewhere near the front. Within 1 year, he had a school prize on the shelf in Helen's living room. Emmanuel grew. He grew up calling Chukwuemeka his brother because that is what Chukwuemeka was. The 2 boys shared the small apartment with Helen for years, through school, through struggles, through the kind of life that does not have a lot of money in it, but has a great deal of love, which turns out to matter more. Chukwuemeka became a doctor,
It took years and sacrifice and bursaries and late nights and Helen selling her gold earrings once when the fees were short. But he became one. He graduated from the University of Nigeria Teaching Hospital in Enugu on a Thursday morning, and Helen sat in the front row in a blue dress, not soaked this time, clean and pressed, and she cried the entire ceremony without apology. The man in the suit came to see Helen the year after the flood. He came to her office. He had heard she was being considered for a senior position, and he wanted to put in a good word. He was connected, he said. He knew people. He smiled, the smile of someone who expects warmth in return. Helen received him politely. She offered him water. She listened to everything he said, and when he was done, she thanked him and told him that the position had already been filled. He left confused. He could not name what was missing, but he felt the absence of it all the way to his car. The woman with the phone, the one who had recorded everything, sent Helen a message 3 years later. The video had surfaced again online. A journalist had picked it up for a story about bystander behavior during flooding. A woman's face was visible in the footage. People were writing things beneath the post. She wanted Helen to speak well of her, to say something kind, to clarify. Helen read the message. She thought about it for a long time. Then she replied with 4 words, "I wish you well." That was all. The woman waited for more. More never came. She sat with that reply for longer than she ever expected to. Longer than any angry response could have made her sit. 4 words, clean and final. Nothing to argue with and nothing to hold on to. The 2 young men who had stood at the edge of the bank, the ones who had almost jumped and then stepped back, met Chukwuemeka years later at a medical outreach in Enugu. They recognized him. He had been the thin, hungry boy from the street, and now he was a doctor with careful hands and a calm voice, checking blood pressure and speaking gently to elderly patients. They did not introduce themselves. They stood at the edge of the crowd and watched him work, and something moved inside them that day that they would never fully find the words for. A reckoning without a courtroom, a consequence without a sentence. They had stepped back from the water, and they had to carry that every time they saw what stepping forward had produced in someone else. Helen never spoke about that day the way people expected her to. She did not perform her pain for anyone's benefit. She simply lived, deeply, fully, with both her sons beside her, in the kind of life that is its own answer to every person who ever decided she was not worth helping. Emmanuel grew up knowing his name meant, God is with us. He also grew up knowing that on the worst day of his life, God had shown up in the body of a hungry boy that the whole street had thrown away, and that the mother who jumped into the water alone had not done so because she was fearless. She had done it because she was a mother, and a mother does not wait for the crowd. Now, tell me, did the people who watched deserve a second chance? Or did they lose that right the moment they stepped back from the water? Drop your answer in the comments. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs it today. And drop a comment. We want to hear from you. God bless you.